Each man and woman of the American Hunters Association joined this secret organization for their own reasons. The idea of them all being sworn to a singular purpose, long forgotten. And there is now seemingly more danger from within the AHA than from the monsters they hunt. Some hunters join to seek revenge, others lust for power. There are those whose ambitions only reach as far as the riches to be earned for successful contracts. Some want fame and notoriety, while others seek redemption. It appears that very few are committed to the cause for just reasons. However, there is one man whose commitment to the mission of the AHA that stands above all others. That man is Sheriff Wayne Hardin. Whilst his methods may be considered ruthless by some, they are necessary to stem the tide of the encroaching darkness. Not much is known about Hardin, but we have some information to draw from. The following is taken from his bio. During the early days of infection, Sheriff Wayne Hardin was instrumental in halting the rapid spread of the infection. However, the inmates he recruited to be hunters proved unreliable, and as events spiraled out of control, he found himself putting many of them back under arrest. This is quite cryptic, but I will discuss all of this later. We learn in Russell's Snakeskin Chambers letters to his father that Hardin worked with and was potentially recruited by a woman named Lynch. This happened very early on in the game's timeline, and in fact appears to be linked to the very first appearance of a hive. It reads, "A woman called Lynch, showing him the ropes, how to heat and skim blood, see in the dark without losing your sight, why to burn the bodies." A young girl had given testimony of an afflicted parent, and they were pursuing her. A huge form of plague fly set upon them, driving Hardin and Lynch into a bunkhouse. The swarm covered the house and gave no chance of letting up. Snakeskin's letters give us a small glimpse into the story of Hardin, yet they also leave us asking more questions, thirsting for more information, and to the story of the lawman turned hunter, especially as the incident with Lynch and Hardin is never fully explained. The letter ends, Hardin sealed up the front door, and Lynch went further into the house to ensure it was sealed up. He didn't see her again for a long time, assumed she was dead, but he was holed up there for almost a week, and letter incomplete. Ends here. It's almost as if someone doesn't want the truth of these events to come to light. Hardin was aware of the threat the monsters posed, not only to Louisiana, but other parts of America. His dedication to stop the spread of the plague led him to recruit inmates from prison. We can presume this prison was Nichols' prison, before it fell to the sculptor. Perhaps he did this out of desperation, or perhaps knowing that these men had nothing to live for, they would commit everything to gain freedom. One such inmate was Russell Snakeskin Chambers, who in writing to his father gives details of Hardin's methods, and of the ritual to becoming a hunter. He talks of how Hardin inspects the prisoners on his rounds, and then offers them their freedom in exchange for working for him. It appears all those offered this opportunity took it without question. He writes, "Hardin took me into the yard. Chalked on the ground were concentric circles in strange patterns. Waiting round the edges were 2 other guards and a handful of other prisoners. One by one, me and the other prisoners walked the circles, reciting the lines Hardin told us to speak. An oath he made up. At the end, we were to drink a gulp of some brackish red liquid. The second boy held it up. He was taken out the yard and I heard a muffled cry. On my turn, the taste of nails, but I kept it down. I drew the short straw. I was first. The guard dragged a man by his hair out of the cell block, threw him at my feet." Russell further explains that the final test was to execute the man placed before him, who was also an inmate named John Hayward, a man whose story I will explore in a future video. It's possible that Hardin saw signs of taint in those he did not deem worthy to join him, or these executions were simply a test of obedience. Whatever the reason, Hardin managed to form a group of seemingly loyal hunters, although we are led to believe some were placed under arrest again, and others simply killed when they became uncontrollable. Hardin's law is not limited to the letters of Russell. There are 2 articles, The Confessions of Sheriff Hardin, Parts 1 and 2. These are a first-person account of part of his time in the bayou. It is in these accounts we start to see a darker side to Sheriff Hardin. It is the following actions that could have led to the assassination attempt. Who is interviewing Hardin is unclear, although whoever it is, they are aware of the Louisiana incident. The confessions are as follows. Interview transcript, 1 of 2. Interviewer, unknown. Interviewee, W. Hardin, undated. I laughed when one of the kids told me they were actually called Mercy Trains. Mercy Trains, orphan trains. It's all going to end in a coffin, isn't it, kid? He looks scared. and he damn well should have been. I told them there's monsters in these swamps. Most of them have learned not to believe in fairy tales. With the kind of lives they've had, they've already learned there aren't any knights or fairies coming around to fix their problems, not without a heavy price. They already know the world is full of monsters. They're just used to the humankind. Not sure which is worse in the end. I put them away all the same. Desperate times, desperate measures. But you already know why we did it. The train arrived at night, and none of the kids knew where they were. I like to use that to my advantage. Keep them disorientated. Keep them from getting comfortable. Nervous as a doe. We let them sleep a few hours before we got them up and dusted off, and handed out the guns. Barely any of them knew how to shoot. City kids. A Winfield is pretty easy to handle though, and we had quite a few laying around. We couldn't waste any ammunition on target practice, so they set off without much training to speak of. When we ran out of guns, we handed out knives. I really didn't expect to see those kids again. We had about an hour until the sun sets, and made it clear their lives depend on what happens tonight. But to be kind, I also told them they were working for the law now. If any of them survived, I told them I'd deputize them. If. Interview transcript 2 of 2. Interviewer unknown. Interviewee W. Hardin. Undated. The first group out was attacked by a pack of the dogs. Was proud to see them take down 3 of them, but not without a few casualties. I couldn't look away. Their flesh tore so easily, but it gave some of the others the chance to slip away. I told them, use the knives to get the right hands and bring them back as a trophy, if the thing has hands. Paws in this case. Prove to me you killed at least 3, and we'll see. Didn't want none of them just hiding out there and coming back telling stories. Always need proof. Can't build a case without proof. I sat on the roof to wait. Had a fair view from there, though the trees blocked a lot. I had saved a marksman for myself. I'd had a lot to think about. With the jails cleared out, I could feed 5 or 6 through winter. What I'd done had crossed a line in the law I'd vowed to uphold. But what good was the law when the world changes like this? One of the loyal ones, Russell, would take the hit if it came. About then I started to hear gunshots in the distance, screams, but mostly it was quiet. Even the bugs gone silent. It took about an hour before they started coming back, which means about an hour until they started to run out of ammunition. 5 of them, 5 out of almost 200. Worse odds than I expected. But what did they have to live for anyway? Nothing. No country, no law, nothing no more. Same as me. You got to fight hard to even scrape by, and even then, you wake up wondering what the point is. Everything looks like a prison these days. Predator, prey, the world has its way, and I had nothing but time. I remember I was humming that to myself. It's one of my favourites. Felt pretty fitting, though I was angling for a fistful of dollars from Huff for this. I watched the survivors, keeping low, thinking. They collected a hell of a lot of trophies, the littlest one wearing them around his neck. Then I had to consider, is the most dangerous one going to be the most help, or the biggest danger to me? I've always been a good shot. It didn't take me long to decide what to do. Didn't need an extra mouth to feed, if it might be trouble later. Nope. These confessions reveal a man who does what needs to be done in order to stem the tide of the sculptor's taint. Whilst he shows little remorse, he clearly feels the burden of his actions, yet is aware that the world is in danger, and without extreme measures, they would all be doomed. There is no date attached to the interview. However, we can ascertain that the events being discussed are after the events in the bayou are escalating, but before the assassination of Philip Huff Jones, the director of the AHA. It's likely this interview is after the Louisiana incident, during a time when the AHA might have been trying to bring to heel some of the more volatile hunters out there. Or it could be Hardin recounting these events by way of voluntary confession. During these confessions, Hardin mentions he is expecting a reward from Huff, and all the information we are given leads us to believe that Hardin is allied to Huff's cause. In a letter to his son, Dr. Philip Huff Jones writes, "Sheriff Hardin is of our cause. Maintaining his friendship is of paramount importance. He's well connected, a good friend of the governor, whose support we also require." So why then did Russell reveal the Huff sent an assassin after Sheriff Hardin? He writes, "Hardin was getting darker in his moods. Huff turned out to be no friend at all. I shot dead a would-be assassin on the steps of our station, an old deputy. We found a letter on his body, said it was the work of Huff, and he burned the letter before I had a chance to read it. He said things have been different since Lynch. Russell's letters then begin to discuss the appearance of a number of different hunter factions beginning to appear in Louisiana, such as Reverend Ishamgurd's religious fanatics, and how skirmishes between these groups are happening more and more frequently. Russell refers to Hardin's group as their own faction. It is possible Hardin initiated the rivalry between himself and Huff by planning to go rogue, or did Hardin's previous association with Lynch force Huff to turn against him? Whatever the reason, all-out war between the hunters was inevitable. The last few letters we have from Russell begin to show a growing trust and unbreakable bond between himself and the sheriff. Hardin referred to Russell as one of the loyal ones willing to take the fall for him. It also appears that after the assassination attempt and growing fighting between the factions of hunters, Hardin slowly becomes more and more reclusive. He's spending more time locked in his office. Russell even implies he doesn't leave their compound anymore. Perhaps he's afraid of another assassination attempt, or the realization that they are losing the war against the sculptor has taken its toll. Or perhaps there is something more sinister at work. Whatever the reason, it appears during the time of Russell's correspondence with his father, Huff is assassinated, and Elwood Finch takes control of that faction of hunters. Russell mentions there is not as much rivalry with Finch as there was with Huff, even going so far as to consider taking one of their hunters, a man they called the Bear, who had taken ill after a fight with the assassin, to Finch. However, the Bear disappears one night and seems to force Hardin out of his stupor. As he and Russell go in search of the Bear, they find him and execute him, in what can only be described as a mercy killing. Hardin is a complicated man, a man bound by duty and honour, yet a man willing to do whatever it takes to fight against the sculptor, going so far as to break his oath to the law using methods many would deem cruel and unnecessary. Regardless of whether you see his actions as wicked or not, Hardin got results, and he helped to slow the spread of the sculptor's influence. We do not know of Hardin's ultimate fate. However, we can speculate he survived the Louisiana incident, and is remembered as a man dedicated and committing his all to fighting the sculptor. Or perhaps he's remembered as a wicked man, damned by his own actions.